Welcome to episode 4 of the Quantum Revolution in Education. And this is where we really get into the meat of it. This is where the kind of the core idea develops, where we take on what I'm going to call the quantum mindset that we need in order to revolutionize education. Remember from previous episodes, we have to think differently if we really want to act differently and try something new and get different results in the classroom. So the last episode, we focused on just kind of defining what Newtonian education means, where we treat students identically, kind of assembly line type education, which we've been doing for a very long time, probably the last 100 years, more or less. And we know all the issues that come with that and that it hasn't really worked. It's left millions of kids behind, certainly since I've been in teaching. So we're going to go and we're going to take the primary quantum idea of particle wave duality of something like an electron, where it can have both personalities, a particle personality and a wave-like personality. And then the key idea in quantum mechanics is that we really do literally think of them as being particle and wave simultaneously if we're not observing them. And then the way that we observe them determines which of those personalities they take. Okay. And we saw these pictures in the previous episode where on the left you have wave properties, the wave personality comes out, and then on the right, in a different kind of experiment, a different way of looking at the electrons or particles, they act as particles, okay? And we can see the tracks they leave behind. So let's take that as inspiration. And as a science geek, I've come to think of human beings as basically electrons, as quantum creatures. Now, mathematically, we call this thing called a wave function in the actual science in order to mathematically talk about the odds or the probabilities of things like electrons being either in a particle state or personality versus the wave personality. And that's the best we can do if we're not observing them. We are just like that. And so I offer this kind of diagram as we introduce quantum mechanical education, thinking of human beings as basically the way we do particles in quantum mechanics. Only this time we're talking about a particle or wave personality, only two different types of personalities, but we're more complex, obviously. Think of what I'm going to call a personality wave function. Think of the emotional states or moods that we all can take on at different times. And there's a whole bunch. Okay, this is obviously we're going to simplify it a little bit. But every human being, whether they're a child or an adult, is a mix of all of these possible mood states or emotional states. Some are more likely to be irritable, others are more likely to be happy or silly, others more likely to be trusting and loving. Um, the size of the fonts on these diagrams might represent the probabilities. Okay? If we're not observing that individual, what are the odds that they're happy or bored or angry or sad or joyful? Whatever, take your pick. Okay, that's the best we can do. And it's not until they walk into the room and we can observe them that one of these many, many possibilities kind of comes out, and that's the person that we see at that moment. This is exactly the way we treat electrons in quantum science. Okay, if we're not observing them, they're a mix of particles and waves simultaneously. And it's when we observe them that one of those two pops out. Okay, this is quantum science in action. This is the way human beings are. I think this is a much more realistic way of thinking about a human being. Our students are like this. If they're in the hallway and we don't see them, we don't know if they're going to be in the right mood or frame of mind in order to learn to their potential for that day. It's not until they walk in. But our experiments are much more complex. They have to interact with a couple dozen other students, each of whom is their own blend, a unique blend of all these personality states. And those interactions can help pick one of these things out. Our moods, the teacher moods, affect everyone else's moods. The appearance of the room, the activities, the lessons that we do, all of that is a complex experiment that helps select the states that our children are inside the classroom. And if we think about it this way, we're going to act differently than if we just say, okay, they're all 15 years old, so they're all going to be the same, and we're going to do the same things for all of them, expect all of them to get the same from that lesson. It doesn't work that way. Thinking them as unique blends is the way to go. This is much more realistic and much more productive in order of how we treat kids in the classroom. I'll go one step further and argue that we have another wave function. We could call it maybe the intellectual wave function. So we all have our own interests and intelligences and strengths and weaknesses. Some of us think better musically, others think kinesthetically, others think more mathematically or logically, spatially. I mean, all of these things, okay, that the idea of like multiple intelligences, we all have all of that in us, but to different degrees, right? Different odds or probabilities of having these things, a unique blend. So both on the emotional side and on the intellectual side, we're blends, we're complex, we're individuals, and we learn differently for the same lessons. Some will get more from a given lesson than others are going to get. And if we don't start to act differently and have more variety and large for create and allow for creativity, allow for individuals to pursue their interests and to hit their own strengths so all of them can see success in a class at some point. That's the revolution that we need. And I think these types of pictures can help us get there. If we think differently about human beings and about our children, we're going to start acting differently within the classroom and hopefully really mean it this time by not letting any child fall behind. This is what I'm talking about. This is the core idea. And again, let's see where this takes us.